Do you have a full-time career or business and at the same time want to be a more present father and husband? Then this is the episode for you. Welcome to Beyond the Rut, the podcast that shares encouraging stories and practical tools to help pull you out of your rut into that life worth living in your faith, family, and career. I'm your host, Jerry Dugan, and in this episode, we're going to be joined by Jason Galicinski. Now, Jason is a father of 10 kids. That's right, 10 kids, all theirs, none of them adopted, and he's also an entrepreneur. Now, one of the things that he saw early on in raising his family was that there were other families that were homeschooling their kids, and as a result, they were seeing more unity and love and connection within those families, and he wanted that too. So we're going to talk about that journey of being a more present father by becoming a homeschooling dad with his life partner. And then as a result, having those moments of mentorship for their kids, seeing their kids grow up into adulthood. And then from there, we're going to transition to share a little bit about a rut he saw that he was facing in his business life and how he was able to get out of that rut by getting out of his own way. So sit back, relax, grab a notebook and a pen because here we go. All right. Hey, Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. I got my cup. We can't see it. There we go. Now, most folks listen to the show. They don't watch the show. So they're like, why is he showing a mug? I can't see it.
Yeah.
Now,
Nice.
You and I met through an organization called the Christian Podcasters Association. And we got to talking to each other, saw that we had a lot of similarities here. And as I got to know more of you, I was like, you got a cool story I'd love to share with the audience here because in some ways you've got a Beyond the Red story and you've got a cool process to get out of there. And I figured, guys listening in will love it and jump on board.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Awesome. Now, unlike the typical American, you don't have like the 2.5 children and you've got 10, if I remember correctly. What are the age ranges, the ages that they range between? 10 kids. Wow.
Yeah. When people see that, they usually don't believe me because I look kind of young and I've always kind of that type of person that looks young. And so I always get this reaction like, you have 10 kids, but yeah, we have, our oldest is 20 and our youngest is 4. So we have pretty much everything in between. It was actually, as the kids were younger, it actually felt easier to manage. I think the hardest part about having a larger family was actually having 4 kids because they were all in diapers and we were all, it's like that whole, like you're breastfeeding in the middle of the night and you're losing sleep and you're just all over the place. And that was when we were kind of going mental but then, once the older kids got a little older and we were able to kind of start assigning them house chores and getting them to help around the house, it started to get significantly easier. So in many ways, I kind of felt like having 10 kids now, now that we have, a couple of adults, we have a few teenagers and a few preteens and then some little ones, I find that it's actually a lot easier in some ways in terms of like the house is actually running a lot smoother and we're sane. Like my wife and I are getting up at normal hours and going to bed at normal hours. And so, but it's a lot different, now than it was, when everyone is little, you're just kind of taking everyone with you everywhere, so we'd all go grocery shopping and we all go here, we all go to, and now it's, there's a lot more just people kind of doing their own thing. And so it's the challenge with our family now is that we've got, kids that are older that want to do their own stuff. And so we're finding that the family is getting more fragmented now and we're trying to fight to have dinner together and, stuff like that is getting harder, but so yeah, it's an adventure for sure.
We only had 2 kids and I'm just thinking about how much of a challenge it was just to change diapers on one of them every night and first thing in the morning and so on. To have 4 simultaneously, that's a challenge there. And then I totally agree with you. As our kids got older, my wife and I will still agree, I think, that the hardest years were when our kids were in middle school because, the growth hormones are kicking in, I guess, and they're emotionally starting to clash. Like their childhood is now clashing with, I guess, wannabe adulthood. You got teenagers who are trying to grow up too fast, and some teenagers who have grown up too fast. And so they're struggling with these like new emotions and new drives that weren't there before. And they're starting to find out things like Santa Claus isn't real. What? Like, yeah, son, you're in 9th grade now. You should probably not say that anymore.
Right.
And he loved holding on to his childhood, I guess you could say. But high school comes around and they're coming into their own. They're doing more of their own thing. And I think that was a heartbreak for my wife, that they had a life of their own. And it was a glimpse into like empty nester life, which is where we are now because we only had 2. And you're experiencing that over and over again for the next at least 14 years. Man.
And my wife and I have joked around that we're probably going to be parents until we're like 65.
Hey.
Or like 70 maybe is when we're going to be like done.
Yeah.
Most people our age are kind of wrapping up the parenting thing by now. And we're about halfway done.
Yeah. Man.
So we're in it for the long run for sure.
So I went on to ask Jason, why homeschooling? Why was it so important for him to homeschool his kids and juggle both business and being a father at the same time? And what he shared with me was he wanted more unity and connection with his kids. He wanted more time to be present in their lives and also to be a mentor for them as they were growing into their teenage years and seeing their childhood clash with the real world. He wanted to be there to help them navigate and sort those things out. And then this is how the conversation continued from there. But, some of the things that stood out to me, though, like you mentioned, the thing that stood out to you when you would have dinner with these families was how engaged the teenagers were with the family. And I think a big part of that lifestyle was teenagers tend to feel like they're excluded. Like, my parents don't understand. They're always treating us like kids. And that is a very delicate time where, teenagers are starting to sprout their wings. They're trying to test these waters called adulthood. And it's important for parents to be there to model that. And by homeschooling, you've got that going on all day, every day. And it's not too far-fetched. In agrarian society, everybody was at home, not just immediate family, but extended family. And a lot of what we see in American culture today is the result of the 1940s and 1950s. This nuclear family is a relatively new thing. Before that, we were still close-knit with our grandparents, grandchildren, aunts, uncles, and so on, living in these extended family-type homes, being close to our parents. Industrialization changed that. And I think the information age, or whatever we're calling the age today, allows us through technology to be able to do that. You can work, run a business. In fact, you run 2 businesses and a nonprofit and a home church. Like, you can do all the things and have a family with 10 kids in it, because.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned about, the industrial thing, because I think that has, in a way, kind of, the American culture. Like you mentioned, I run a nonprofit. My nonprofit's based in Zambia, and the culture in Africa is really different than the culture in America. The culture in Africa is a lot more community oriented and just this dependency on one another. And the culture in America tends to be more individualistic. Like, everyone is their own individual and they have their own priorities and they have to have their own career. And you're like, everyone is independent of one another. And that can create a lot of loneliness as the kids get older. They feel like, especially my older kids, they start to feel this, like, I have to find this one purpose in my life, and they put too much pressure on themselves. But I think as we were going through the homeschooling process and learning about how to do this, one thing that really stood out to me early on was, back in the day, like 100, 200 years ago, families would not only like school their kids in more community settings, but they would also have family businesses, where typically the dad would, be a farmer or some kind of agricultural thing, and the children would help with the family business, and so there was a lot of community of learning, but there was also a lot of community with, like, the children would kind of help pull the weight of the family. Not that they're, doing everything, but they would see dad out working in the field, and they would want to naturally just go help him, and what can I do to help, and how can I help you? And
so we've talked about why homeschooling was so important for him to be closer with his kids. And he started to see value in being an entrepreneur, doing business from home, and seeing that as a provider of teachable moments with his kids. And so this is how he started to infuse the two experiences together into one bigger life. Here we go.
They would learn things from their dad or from their mom by just watching them run businesses. And we don't get a lot of that, especially if children are in public school and then they move from public school to college. They kind of get into this like bubble and they have no idea like what real life is like. And then their parents are off doing their corporate job. And so there's like this real disconnect that happens. And so one of the things, it was kind of interesting when we were starting homeschooling, when we had about 3 kids, we had this opportunity come up with a software company that I started in 2006 called Ministry Sync. It's now called Fundeasy. It just rebranded a few years ago. But it was, as the Lord gave me the opportunity to start this business, that was one thing that I started to do fairly soon in, was try to figure out, well, how can I include my kids? Or it wasn't even really that intentional. It was just more like they saw me starting a business at home, and it was just kind of like, what can I do to help? And so I would go to conferences and, create brochures. And so they were seeing this happen, and it was kind of almost like the modern farm in a way, where they were seeing me going through this process of starting a business, and they wanted to help. And, so I would try as best as I could to bring them along. So every time I went to a conference, I kind of had this rule in my head, like I didn't like to travel alone. And the airports were nicer to you. People are always nicer to you when you have a child with you. So I would just be like, I would just bring a child. I just had this rule of like, I'll just bring a child with me every time I go to a conference, and then it's kind of fun, then I get to have like some alone time with them. They get to experience an airplane ride, they get to have special time with daddy, but then they're helping me like at the booth when we're, passing out whatever, they're standing next to me and they're helping, whatever. Or if they get bored, then we have a backpack where they do, their math or something for a couple hours. And so like, that was kind of my approach when I was starting the business, was I wanted to try to include my kids. And it was kind of like that, I was being intentional in the sense of like, I want to try to incorporate kind of what families used to do, on the farm, but obviously this is software, so we're not out on the field, but my field is going to conferences and going to places. And so I would try to bring my kids along. And as a result of that, they started to pick up on a lot of the entrepreneurial kind of stuff that I would do. I started noticing as they got older, they wanted to start their own businesses, and they're very creative, and they would come up with their own things. And then they would be doing a lot of the stuff that they would see me doing, so it's kind of interesting, to watch that process play out.
Yeah. I was just making a note here for myself, like, I'm curious, like how many people get into the entrepreneurial space whose parents were entrepreneurial because they saw their parents doing this day in and day out, whether it's, mom and dad owned a bakery, or,
right.
Dad was a plumber, or, dad was an IT software guy. And it's like,
and the nice thing is, like, if you homeschool them, you can bring them along a lot easier. They can be included in life a lot easier. And I think that helps to keep the kids more connected to your heart, because that was always my wife and I's goal, was how do we keep their hearts close to us? Yeah. Not that we're trying to control them, but we want to know, like, I think someone told us early on, like, if you know what makes them tick and like what their inner motives are, then you can help guide them a lot easier. But where I think a lot of families get stuck is like they get disconnected so much that the parents the kids start to think that the parents don't care about them, and the parents start to think that the kids are disrespecting them because they don't care about them. And so there becomes this like battle of the wills kind of thing. And I don't think that needs to happen. I think it's just at some point in time, we lost touch with their heart, and there's no relationship there, and so I think homeschooling allows you to, keep their heart, keep that relationship. And it's, like I say in my coaching business now, it's all about relationships. It's all about who and it's all about, keeping those relationships real, and I think we need to do that with our families as well as our professional, relationships. So,
and, for those of us who aren't homeschooling our kids and don't have plans to, we're not saying, well, now your kids are screwed. Like, you can take lessons drawn from what we're talking about here. Homeschooling provides you that environment where there is that constant contact with your kids. There's that constant interaction that you don't get in what I guess some people might think this is the traditional way, but this really isn't. That's the send your kids off to school while you send yourself off to work all day and then come home to a total stranger on both sides. And it's like, well, if you're aware of that setting and those stakes being set against you, I think now you're aware and you can take steps to make sure you're breaking those barriers down.
Yeah, you just have to be more intentional. You probably just have to, you're going to have a lot less time. That's the part that kind of was hard. That's hard for people in public school or work, is everyone has their own schedule. And then like the time that you have together, you're probably so exhausted from your schedule that you just want to watch TV or watch a movie. Like the last thing you want to do is put the hard work in like getting to know someone, really deeply, because it does take a lot of work, so the homeschooling, it's more about the flexibility. Like we get our school done by lunchtime. We start at like 6 a.m. We're done by lunch. And then we have, like the 1 o'clock hour to 5 o'clock hour is like free time. And that's when, the kids are doing projects with dad or helping out mom or cleaning the house. And so we just have a lot more time because we can just structure our school, in a more efficient way and just get it done fast, and we can teach them how to take control of their own school schedule. So as they get older, we try to get them to where they're, responsible for their own education. Because like we try to teach them to be, if you really think about, life, like learning doesn't stop just because you graduate from high school or college. Like I'm still learning stuff. Like I get on YouTube all the time. I'm always Googling, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do you use AI? What is this thing all about? So you never stop learning. So for us, our goal isn't necessarily just to get them through school, but to teach them how to be life learners, like give them a love for learning so that as they get older, they actually take responsibility. Like they have more of this like drive to want to learn because they're curious, because they're not trying to do algebra because it's a checklist, but they're like actually want to know, like, why is this important, or how can I use this, and so that as they get older, if they can start to take responsibility for their own learning, then it kind of they have like this natural instinct to want to learn, which kind of like propels them to just into life better, that just transitions into adulthood with like, well, what are you interested in? Like my daughter, Anna, she's 20. She was, we had her in music lessons and she was doing all kinds of stuff. But then for chemistry, my wife found this curriculum called Chemistry in the Kitchen.
Oh,
and it was all about how to learn chemistry through mixing ingredients and through like kitchen stuff. And it was like a legit program. Like they were teaching like real chemistry, but using like kitchen stuff. And so because she's into cooking and baking and stuff, she she gravitated towards that more. That just made more sense to her. So she learned all the chemistry stuff that normal people learn, but she just learned it in a different context. And then that ended up sparking a passion in her where she ended up starting her own bakery.
Oh, wow.
So now she runs a baking business called I Caked It. And she makes custom cakes and does all this baking stuff. And it all came out of homeschool because it was like she found something that she was passionate about. And it all started through chemistry of all things, but it was a great way how you can learn what the kids really love. And then you can just like focus learning everything on their passion. And then that really transitions them into adult nicely. So
yeah, and it's huge that you allowed that space for them to do that because whether it's learning or being coached, and you're a professional coach, you'd shared, it matters to the learner if there's relevance there. The motivation is more genuine when I see the relevance. It's the same in the workplace, that somebody's going to be more engaged in their work if they see the relevance, what's in it for them if they do the work, but also what's the impact of the work if they do it or don't do it. And it's the same thing with learning. Why do I want to learn this? Well, I'm just curious. And so because that question came from me intrinsically, I'm more likely to bust out Google and start going down that rabbit trail, watching the YouTube videos, go to scholar.google.com to maybe tackle a peer-reviewed paper.
And if you have the time and you have the focus and you have the ability to focus and you have the free time, then you're gonna just follow your heart. You're gonna follow your passion, and that's what we want. So, man,
is I Caked It? Is that a YouTube channel? Is that
what was that?
There's a YouTube channel called I Caked It.
Yeah. So yeah, she started. She's got her own I Caked It business, and she also is wanting to be a writer. So she started a YouTube channel, Anna Galicinski, on how to be a writer. So she's actually got multiple things going on. She's actually in a college alternative program to learn how to be a writer. It's a mentorship program with authors who mentor other wannabe authors, and so her dream is to become an author. But as part of the program, they said you need to learn how to start a business because you have to learn marketing skills, and so they encouraged her to start a business, and she's created I Caked It as her business, so
her website looks way more professional. A lot of that
stuff I think she learned from watching Dad and just seeing how I started things.
Yeah.
It was interesting as I was thinking about this show and about how you talk about your audience getting stuck in ruts. It might be I could see people listening to us and just thinking, wow, this guy sounds like everything is all good. And, he's got 10 kids, he's got 3 businesses, he's got, a nonprofit. Everything must be hunky dory and lovely. Some people the stars align and other people, the stars don't align, or something. And I would say it's like the farthest thing from the truth. We've gone through a ton of problems and issues, over the years, and I've gotten stuck in a rut. The most recent rut that I got stuck in was actually over COVID. So, you mind if I share this story?
Yeah, we got some time. Do it.
Yeah. So basically, we started this software company, Fundeasy, in 2006. It's an event management software for nonprofits. We help them with fundraising events, and it relatively started with basically nothing. And just an idea, and it was the total American dream, come out of a garage, starting in the basement, and I coded the whole app myself, and my partner helped with sales, and we built this thing up to a multi-million-dollar business now. It took a long time, but we experienced the whole growth cycle of like the euphoria of growing and just people being interested and buying into it and all this stuff. And so there was a time period where business is booming and you're hiring people and everything seems wonderful. but there would always be issues that would happen, and employees would leave and people would come and go, and so we always had struggles along the way. Well, the most recent struggle was COVID, which I'm sure affected everyone listening, it's to some degree or another. But because our business was event driven, so when COVID shut down every single event in the whole country, it literally just shut our business down, because all the events that we had planned for the year basically got canceled, which meant all our income just got canceled. So we went from being a multi-million-dollar business to a $0 business.
Just like that too.
It just in like 2 weeks, and it was totally out of nowhere and totally just God's grace that we even made it through that season. But when that happened, it totally rocked my world in terms of like, as a leader, I like didn't know what to do. Like there's been issues that have happened where, I can generally kind of noodle my way through and figure out a solution. But like my team kept coming to me saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I was like, for the first time ever in like 20 years, I had no idea. Like, I was like, I don't know. I don't know what to do, and I was getting kind of frustrated with my team, and they were getting frustrated at me because I didn't have a plan and I didn't know what to do. And I was getting stressed out, and they were getting stressed out because I was getting stressed out. And so we had a bunch of people quit. In fact, about half my employees quit because they were afraid that the business was going to shut down. And that just added more fuel to the fire. Right. And it just kind of plunged me into depression. Like I went through a season in the summer where my wife and I just went on vacation. I was like, I just need to get away for like 2 weeks. And we rented a beach house somewhere. And I just remember walking up and down the beach, like every morning and every night, just praying and crying out to God and just being like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do anything. And like, I had to kind of like go through this season where I had to surrender. I had to get to the point where I had to surrender the business. I had to be okay with losing it, and that was really hard for me. And I think that can sometimes be, what gets us into ruts is we get like emotionally attached to things that we've spent a lot of time on and we have a hard time letting them go. So for me, because I had spent 20 years of my life building this software company, it was hard for me to let that go. It was extremely hard. It was like, I felt like it was like a second marriage, or I was getting a divorce or something, and so it was, but I had to get to that point where I felt like I needed to surrender this to the Lord. And I did eventually get to that point where I said, Lord, if this is, maybe you have something else for me that I can't see. I don't know, but I nothing got better until I got to that point where I was willing to give it to the Lord and surrender it. And once I did, then God started to help with solutions. So we ended up bringing in a different management company, and it's a complicated, long story, but at the end of the day, they ended up kind of helping us restructure and get things kind of turned around. And what I started to realize was, I don't think I want to be a CEO of a software company anymore. Like I'm good at starting things, but I'm not good at like managing people and all the, like, when the company gets to a certain point where it's not about, you're not nimble anymore, just making decisions and getting things done really fast. You actually have to have systems, you have to have processes, you have to have accountability. And I just wasn't very good at regulating that kind of stuff. Like that was more of like a manager type person. And I'm not really that kind of guy.
And you were able to outsource all that, you said.
Yeah. And so we were able to, through that process, we kind of went through this restructuring exercise where I actually started to realize that the very business that I was in, what really had happened over 20 years was that because I built the business from scratch, a lot of the processes that were in existence were actually centered around me. I was actually doing a lot, but I didn't realize it until everything kind of unraveled. And then when the new company came in and started, restructuring things, they started to realize like everything is going through Jason. Why is everything going through Jason? So they started to, try to pull things apart and try to create separate systems, and which really made it difficult for me because I was like, I found my identity in all that. Like my sense of purpose was like in doing everything.
Yeah.
So it eventually they got to the point where the business wasn't dependent on me anymore. It took about 3 years. But now the business is in a much better place from a management perspective because we actually have systems in place that aren't dependent on me. And then just recently we hired a new CEO, which I kind of realized through this process, I don't really want to be a CEO. I kind of always felt like the CEO is like the best job in the planet, and because you get to rule your own roost but it comes with its own set of challenges. So, I guess I kind of realized I needed to step down, and let someone else kind of take it, which was hard to go through. But yeah, at the same time, as I started to acknowledge that needed to happen, the Lord started to open up new opportunities. So, basically I had this other person I was working with through the software company who does coaching and more. He helps Campus Crusade with a lot of fundraising strategy. Mm-hmm. And so while all that was happening and everything was kind of going down, the Lord was kind of growing this new idea of like coaching, and like working with nonprofits to help them with fundraising strategy, and so I started dabbling with that. And then this, my friend and partner now, Jim Dempsey, who works at Crew. Crew is a global organization. It used to be called Campus Crusade for Christ.
Yeah.
But he's the chief development officer at Crew, and him and I ended up starting a new endeavor together called Fundraising Masterminds, and we help people now with fundraising strategy. So we help nonprofits basically get fully funded, is what we like to say.
That's phenomenal.
We help them with fundraising strategies. And so it's interesting because like through that process of unraveling my identity, and going through this like, restructuring, I kind of realized that I was in a rut, but I didn't really realize it. Mm-hmm. And it took COVID to kind of get me loose from that. And now I feel like I'm in a better place, doing the coaching because I'm back to helping people. Yeah. And I'm back to working with people. And that's kind of what the software started. I started helping people, but then over time it just became about bugs and issues and servers. Yeah. And now I'm back to helping people. So it's a lot nicer.
And something you shared with me in our previous conversation was that you found out you were the bottleneck. We're actually all out of time now, but the one thing I realized here in talking with you about parenting, fatherhood, about the company, about being the bottleneck was that like you're parenting your kids in a way that they can thrive without you being there because they're going to grow up, they're going to be adults. And you found out in the business with Fundeasy that you were kind of that bottleneck there. And once you restructured and allowed it to be run without you having to be there all the time, it found its new success, and now you're helping other people do the same thing. And
and the cool thing is that the kids are now helping me with the coaching because they saw me start this coaching thing. And the cool thing about it is that they can't really code, so they never really could help that much with the software. Mm-hmm. But with the coaching stuff, we started a podcast, and so my boys are helping me with like the recording of the podcast, and one of my boys helps me with SEO. Another one does the editing. My daughter helps with social media. So through the process of starting that, they've jumped back in and like, how can we help you, start this, and that's just, it's
all of
such
it,
a
just
cool
coming
thing.
back full circle,
love it.
Right? Love that.
It's just amazing. So
Man, Jason, it was great to have you on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Wow. I hope you got a lot out of that conversation like I did. Whether you homeschooled your kids or you sent them off to school, that doesn't really matter. That doesn't make it right or wrong. The key element there was, are you intentionally creating time to be with your children, to be there, to listen to them as they're navigating through life, as they're exploring how they're going to be who they are meant to become? Are you going to be there for them? How are you going to be there for them? What intentional things will you do to support them? Not just tell them how to be. That isn't growing them. That isn't helping them grow. But what is it that you're doing intentionally to provide the space where they can learn, they can explore, they can do trial and error, all those things, so that when they become adults, they're good. They can live on their own. They don't have to rely on you. And you can step back and say, yes, I did it. I did my job. I raised them and I sent them off into the world. Now look at them be the people they were meant to be, making a positive impact on the world. That's such a great reward as a parent. And then I hope you also got some value out of that conversation Jason and I had around that professional rut that he found himself in. As the CEO of a company, he was kind of in the way. Everything was bottlenecking through him, especially in a crisis, and he applied some lessons from his coach to really put things in place so he could get out of the way, his teams could thrive, and things got back on their feet. And I talk a lot about that with my tent framework, where you build the trust you need with your team members, you empower them, you help them navigate towards success, both for the company and for themselves, and then you thrive together. You celebrate those wins because you're all in this together, just like they say on High School Musical. So if you want more of Jason, you want more episodes just like this one, go check out the show notes at beyondtherut.com/415. There you'll find all that information, especially on how to get to fundraisingmasters.net and get Jason's help to fundraise for your own Christian nonprofit. If you just want some more guidance on creating the definition of success for your life, go to beyondtherut.com/goals, and there you'll get a free tool called Measure It to Make It, and it'll guide you through how to define success on the 5 F's: faith, family, fitness, finances, and future possibility. So you are pursuing success on your terms, not what somebody else told you, but your terms. Now, I'm glad you joined me for this episode, and I look forward to joining you again with you on the next one. But until then, go live life beyond the rut. Take care.